Great company, you come into the organization, you come in, you do your training, you got it done, you check the box. Now we're going to make sure this product is amazing. Problem is, no accountability from the rep or the physician. We don't know if the information was retained. The delivery method probably didn't all absorb because they crammed everything into a 1 day or a 2 day training, or maybe even a week training, depending upon the specialty. I don't know. And the takeaway is just go out and do what you know what to do. So you leave people kind of like, yeah, I got it. I know what I'm supposed to do. Unfortunately, 6 months from now, a year from now, what's going to be the problem? We're not selling enough. We don't have adoption. We don't understand why they're not picking the right patients. Well, what did we do? In the very beginning, we data dumped everything. We really didn't have somebody who really understood how to give information to have them retain the information. And now you're left with having to scramble, hurry up. We need to change the training. We need to do something different because now we need to meet our revenue numbers. That's commonly where we come in.
Welcome to the #1 show and the source of truth for all things MedTech. Here, we reveal the secrets and stories behind the investments, science, and commercialization of the MedTech industry. Every week, we'll take you on a wild ride with the biggest names in the game, from entrepreneurs and investors who are shaking up the market to healthcare providers who are revolutionizing the way we think and practice medicine. So hold on tight and get ready for a journey like no other. This is the State of MedTech. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Now, this episode is focused on a new topic. Actually, I haven't really covered it as much, but I think it's a very important one, which is training. I think that when it comes to training in our industry, a lot of times it's just purely focused on some basic product training. But training in reality is one of the most important parts, especially when it comes to a product launch and in terms of aligning both sales and marketing efforts. Now, for that, there's plenty of people out there who cover this topic, but not so many that I trust enough to bring on the show. And that's why I brought Liz Cumby on. So Liz is a good friend of mine, but also we have a mutual friend, Tony Recupero, who's the president of SI-BONE, who spoke very, very highly of her. And when I was thinking about this topic, he had suggested, like, oh, why don't you talk to Liz? And I said, yeah, of course. That makes a lot of sense, actually. So in this episode, we talk about the importance of training and more so how you get that alignment, right? And again, this is one area that I had to say that in our industry, we often pass off to marketing, and marketing is not, for pun intended, trained to do this, right? And so that's why we end up with sort of subpar mediocre training. Now, if you want to learn more about Liz and her firm, and in my personal opinion, I'm a big fan of hiring experts when it comes to the most important things in my business. So you can go to Cumby Consultant, Cumby spelled Cumby, consulting.com to learn more, especially if you have a big product launch coming up. So with that being said, here's my episode with Liz Cumby. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. So I'm joined by a good friend of mine. That's Liz Cumby, who's the founder of Cumby Consulting. I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. We never. Okay. I got it right. I got it right on the first try. That's so right. Liz, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. So one of the things that we talked about is, I invited you on the show, and when we talked, I was like, what's something the industry really sucks at? And like, there's kind of a long laundry list of things. But one of the things you pointed out, which I totally agree, is that they oversimplify training, both on the sales training side and physician training side, and then they usually botch it. I completely agree with you, because I think there's a very strong persuasive element when it comes to good training and education. And so before we start off there, maybe for the audience who's just learning a little bit about you, can you give us a little bit of background on you? And just I want to just give you like a little street cred. I reached out to our mutual friend, who's also a good friend and mentor of mine, the great Tony Recupero, which he's going to hate that I said the great Tony Recupero, but he is great. He is a legendary, for those who, for what, I don't know, if you're living under a rock, you don't know, Tony Recupero is the president of SI-BONE. He also led the team at Kaifon and the sales team for, I think, to date, the largest acquisition in spine history. I think Kaifon was acquired for $3 billion, I believe, somewhere in that ballpark. Everyone, a lot of people make good money. So, but before we jump into things, Liz, give us a little bit of background on you.
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me on. I love that we have the opportunity to talk today. Background about myself, I've been in training education my entire career. I know I'm that rare form where I didn't come in from sales or I didn't come in from marketing. So been in the med device space on the training side, training physicians and reps on all different medical specialties. So 10 years ago, after I left industry, I started my own consulting practice where I was just going to find the cool startup. And here I am 10 years later working with a lot of really cool startups. And so agnostic to what part of the body that I train in, but just really making sure that we work with disruptive technology. So not kind of me too products, but really products that are changing the game of healthcare. So really glad to be here with you today, sharing best practices on training and things that we both think suck.
I love it. And I like that you use that term because that's, I like to say that as well, which is like, I don't work with Me Too companies. I mean, there are some Me Too companies that come to me and they're like, can you help us with this? I try, but for the most part, I'm just like, I just, there's only a limited amount of time and your career is going to have only a limited amount of space to actually do things. And I don't want to be doing it on like Me Too, Me 3, Me 4 companies and products, right? So let's start with the first thing, which is what's wrong with training as it is today?
Yeah, I think a way to think about this is there's many different ways that you can evolve as an industry. And we know medtech tends to be a little bit more behind in some things. And when we think about training, it often becomes minimized because so many people are focused on the product launch or the clinical trial or the revenue that needs to be created. And they say, oh, just put a PowerPoint together and train. And also, what happens is companies decide that marketing will then put the training together and then training will just implement. That's a huge miss, Omar, because what we're missing there is how do adults actually learn? How do they retain information? And then what do we really think a PowerPoint with a ton of words is going to do? Because truly, none of us learn that way. And it's boring and it's not the way to make things happen.
I totally agree. And actually, even Steve Jobs once famously said, he's like, I don't want to have any meetings with PowerPoint. Like, if you need a PowerPoint, you don't know what the F you're talking about. And I kind of agree. I think there's a time and a place for using PowerPoint and images. But even me, when I present or talk to people, like I prefer not to do that. So let's start with a little bit more of sort of a deeper dive into what it's like now, and then we can transition to what it should be. So let's start with the usual case, which is company, let's say, grows, they raise some money, they hire a bunch of salespeople, and it's like, hey, we need to train these people. Where does it start going wrong?
Yeah, so I think the first time, so generally at that organization, there's probably not a training department fully baked as of yet, and so they have the R&D, the engineers, the marketers. They have their best salespeople already in the field because normally at that point you hire people who know how to sell already. They just need to learn your product. And so what they'll do is they'll bring people in and say, hey, we have 10 PowerPoints we've been using for pitch decks. We've been using these with our engineers, with our surgeons, our friendly surgeons. Just use this information, just clean it up a little bit, add some color to it, and let's train. And then they'll have either a marketer or their engineer come in and give that information out, deliver the presentation. I'm going to use the term presentation. We'll come back to that in a minute. And then we'll have a discussion with the group. We'll keep them in town for a day or two, send them back into the field and let them do what they need to do. That's on the sales reps. You have a subject matter expert. You have them deliver the content. You have the sales reps sit and listen. They go out, implement. Now for physicians, so same scenario we're still talking about. What will happen is we have friendly physicians. These reps have been in the field. They know this medical space. They know, these 10 best surgeons. We're going to fly them in. We're going to talk to them. We're going to give them a PowerPoint. We're going to do a lab. And then we're going to send them home and hopefully it'll all work out. So sounds great, right? It sounds like every company you come into the organization, you come in, you do your training, you got it done, you check the box. Now we're going to make sure this product is amazing. Problem is no accountability from the rep or the physician. We don't know if the information was retained. The delivery method probably didn't all absorb because they crammed everything into a 1-day or a 2-day training, or maybe even a week training, depending upon the specialty. I don't know. And the takeaway is just go out and do what you know what to do. So you leave people kind of like, yeah, I got it. I know what I'm supposed to do. Unfortunately, 6 months from now, a year from now, what's going to be the problem? We're not selling enough. We don't have adoption. We don't understand why they're not picking the right patients. Well, what did we do? In the very beginning, we data dumped everything. We really didn't have somebody who really understood how to give information to have them retain the information. And now you're left with having to scramble, hurry up. We need to change the training. We need to do something different because now we need to meet our revenue numbers. That's commonly where we come in.
Got it. And, if you don't mind, I want to dig deeper on the sales training side. And the reason why I picked that one is I think, if you do like a root cause analysis, I think that's where like a lot of these problems start, because if you don't do the right training with sales, then sales is ill-equipped to go out and sell. And then when they do sell, and this happens, I feel like, especially in capital equipment, robotics company, they sell to the wrong physicians, and so the company wastes a lot of time, resources, energy selling, closing, and then trying to, make those physicians successful when at the very beginning, it's just like the wrong persona type, right?
And I don't know if that goes back to training. I think that goes to overall strategy. And I think when you have a company early on trying to decide who is the best target, you're going to experience that. But I think what you're saying is that they don't have that group that they should be targeting or the characteristics. At least go after that and then know what that group is, if they will adopt or not, or if not, then go to the next group. And so in training, we need to be crystal clear and work collaboratively with marketing to understand, okay, who are the 4 buckets you're going after? Who are the physicians? What do they represent? Is it an academic? Is it a community hospital? What is the demographic you're looking for? Be able to articulate that to our learners, having our learners then be able to regurgitate that back to us. And when I say us, I'm referring to training, and then be able to have them go out into the field. Training doesn't stop there, though, Omar. When you're in the field, we still need that 2-way dialogue. We need training, we need marketing, and we need sales, that triangle, to still continue to work together so that we can refine that messaging. We can refine that training. We can refine what they're saying, because ultimately you don't know early on with the product where it's going to land, but we have to have that conversation, and we have to give them the opportunity to be able to discuss those things in a safe forum where they can then give feedback and then pivot if needed.
What are some of the common mistakes that are made? Like, because inevitably I can guarantee that there's going to be a head of marketing or director of marketing who's in the situation where they need to do training. They can't afford yet, let's say, to bring in a firm like yours, but they got to do something. What's your advice to those people in terms of like some basics things where it's like, make sure you do this, make sure you don't do that?
Great question. And I think there's a lot of things that companies can do on their own without having an expert there. The number one thing would be take away the visual and make it more discussion. And when I say visual, I don't want to say PowerPoint's the villain, because PowerPoints are very good when used correctly. But if you force yourself to take that away, then you have to create discussion. And so discussion is how people learn. Activity. So passive learning is just when you're sitting and lecturing. You're not going to retain that much information. But if you're actively learning and participating and discussing and workshopping and doing all of those things, you're actually going to win. So that's the number one thing I would do if you don't have the resources for somebody in the training space, is just to take the visual away and figure out how can you train without having that visual. Number 2 is, now that you've figured out how to train without the visual, go back to your visual and now add in what you think could support whatever it is you're trying to do. So let's just take, for example, a value proposition. You don't need a slide that shows the value proposition. You need to have the audience, the sales reps, be able to regurgitate the value proposition. How are you going to do that? Are you going to use sticky notes? Are you going to do a Jamboard virtually? What are you going to do that's going to represent? Because the way that you learn is through visual, audio, and kinesthetic, so talk or touching. How can you incorporate all 3 of those principles into what you're doing? And then I would say, lastly, is after you do that, you have to find a way to have touch points. So meaning training is not a one-time event. I'll say that over and over and over again. Training is not the event. Training is a continuum. So you made your workshop or you made your discussion. You have visuals that support that. And lastly, you're going to have regular occurrences where you're going to bring up the same information and make sure they're getting it over and over. So back to the value prop example. You're going to discuss the value prop. You're going to have them decide what the value prop is together, knowing that marketing's already created that. Have them put it in their own words. Next, what you're going to do is then have them have a visual that supports that. They're going to create their own visual. The third thing you're going to do is, after they leave training or after they leave the virtual session, 1 week, you're going to send them a text message with, here's the value prop. The next week, you're going to send them an email of fill in the blank. The next week, you're going to send something in, tell me a time when the value prop didn't work. That's just an example of how training should be done. And I'm saying, I know that sounds like a lot of work, and that's super different than to come and dump and say everything and show up at a meeting. That methodology works a lot better. Short snippets, and information that's meaningful to them, that's not forced on them, that they develop themselves. Adults like to learn by themselves, and really giving them a chance to feel like they're the ones in control as well.
How do I completely agree, by the way. How do you feel, so for me, when I started my company, like I had an education company before I had anything else. And that was like really to my course. And one of the things I felt that was super important is, I think people they put too much value on like live teaching and not just saying, we need to just deliver this in a recorded fashion, let people digest it however they want, and then come back for like in-depth discussion and engagement. For like one thing that I thought of for companies is that for sales training, like let's say just on how the product works and everything, they can use Kajabi, Teachable, even like, I don't know, unlisted videos on YouTube, have those all recorded and have people watch them and then come in and dive directly like into discussion and everything. Is that kind of like a really basic, like bare bones way that you would say people should start versus like, again, I've been in plenty of companies where they train by flying everybody in and it's like 2 or 3 days of just an onslaught of presentations. And a lot of times I'm just thinking, I'm like I went to medical school and I was just like, this is like more than like we would handle medical school. Like, I don't know if anybody's retaining anything. Like this just seems like it's just like beating people to death with like information.
You're spot on. And I think that's another pitfall that we experience in med device, is thinking that our time is so limited that we have to force everything into them at once. And so going back to using more of like a learning management system that you mentioned, there's a time and place for that type of work. And so my philosophy is generally, if it's more rote memorization type information, that's something you can have them do ahead of time. So it's called a flipped classroom in the education world, where you would have them go through their self-study, understand product specs, understand all the different nuances of the product, as well as the anatomy, the physiology, the disease state, all of those things they can absolutely learn on their own, because there's no discussion. There's no like, well, what if this or what if that? It's really, this is what it is. So I like actually doing that ahead of time and giving them, so then we use the in-person time for things that require a little bit more discussion. So such as you mentioned, like patient selection, physician selection, the nuances of troubleshooting. If the device does this, then what do you do? If this type of patient shows up and this is what happens, how do you handle that? So really taking that classroom piece and making it more in depth versus having it be the first exposure to your product, I think is a huge miss. So flipping that and having them do that. But I'm going to caveat that, Omar, because a lot of companies will do that. They'll create these self-studies, but guess how long they'll make these online modules? Like
way too long.
Give me a number.
Like in terms of like minutes or pages. I'm gonna guess like a few, like I don't know, 4 or 5 hours.
So they generally put modules together that run roughly an hour, and there's multiple modules, right?
That's already too much. Like one module that goes for an hour. Like my course, I think the longest module I have is like 15 minutes.
That's right. And just like your listeners right now, so we've been talking for roughly 10, 15 minutes. I bet they've zoned out 3 or 4 times. I bet they're hearing keywords and they're coming back. So that's why it's important. Like, so your listeners right now are wanting to listen to this and they are already distracted. Think about your sales reps as well, who they have their boss calling, their kids in the background. They have all these things and you expect them to sit down for 4 hours and do modules? No, not happening. So my caveat that I was mentioning before is, if you are going to do pre-work or home study or online modules or whatever you want to do, it has to be short. It has to be broken up over multiple days, and it has to have a discussion component to it as well, or accountability, along with their manager, who will also make sure that that is a requirement, because you can't have people showing up to the course if they didn't do the pre-work.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think like, I don't know, like, I feel like outside of like a national sales meeting, like these trainings can be, just really expensive things that like, not like, and I don't know. I think this is like a theme here for our industry, which is like our industry is used to doing things that cost a lot of money, but like not with a whole lot of scrutiny, like going to a conference. They'll drop, a small company will drop easily $100K, $200K on a conference and everything. But then for something that actually is going to make a difference, like, I don't know, running a campaign online or something that might cost like, let's say like, I don't know, with ad spend and everything, like 10K, it's like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. And it's like, we have all these like hard metrics and, I don't know why the industry doesn't look at like current things that they consider like textbook or the playbook. I love that term, the playbook, and say, yeah, this costs a lot of money. It doesn't seem to be producing the results that we want. Maybe we should do something different here,
I think there's a small shift, Omar. I think that, some of the companies that I work with are very future forward. But I also think it depends very much on the regulatory aspect of things and how open they are to change. And meaning that a lot of companies are very traditional in the way that they do things because they're so worried about quote unquote breaking the rules. So I think that being so regulated makes it challenging. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I think it's such BS though. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like regulatory, like they pulled the regulatory / legal boogeyman.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like most of the times, a lot of these things aren't going to come into the purview of like regulatory. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me. Maybe I feel like sometimes it's a cop out for the industry to be like, to say that and then not change. I mean, what's this is like your expertise. What's been your experience?
I think for me, the biggest thing that frustrates me with the overregulation is the ability to track outcome. And when I say that, what I'm referring to is if you have a physician attend a training, right now you can't legally say, because of this training, they have done X number of cases. Like you can't track cases to training. To me, I think that's a miss because then you don't know, like, did the training do what it was supposed to do or did it not? And nothing to do with sales.
They want.
Right.
They can't.
You cannot track cases to training.
Like legally, you cannot do that. Right.
No.
Got it.
But for me as an educator, I want to know what those numbers are because I want to see if you attended my training on December 1st, but then you didn't do a case until February 1st. Like how many people do I have attending my training who are not immediately putting this into action? Because I know as an educator, that's not going to do it. Like that outcome's not going to be as good as someone who went to training on December 1st and did a case December 15th.
What can you technically track? Like what are some leading indicators? Like let's look at the physician training side. What are some leading indicators that you can track? That will help.
There's not a blanket statement that I can give because there's I wish I could give you that.
But there has to be something though, because the whole purpose is like, okay, somebody comes and gets trained. Do they use the product afterwards? Yes or no? And again, okay, okay, let's, maybe, and I think the way this is just divided out is like, okay, so for robotics, a lot of times when they bring people in for a lab to see the robot, they consider that a training, right? But they don't have the robot yet. I think on other sides, like if a vendor has a contract with a hospital, they bring people in for a training, and then that physician the next day can like use that product if they wanted to. So obviously, I think there's a nuance there. Sure. But I mean, there's got to be some other ways to like measure the success of training if it's not directly correlated with cases.
So what I do and what I advise my companies to do is we actually track the adverse events. So the SAEs and AEs, because those to me would be directly correlated back to training if it's not a product issue. And so that has nothing to do with sales. It has nothing to do with anything other than did they do the procedure exactly how we trained them to do. And so that's where I look at, because ultimately my job is patient safety and physician safety.
Yeah. And I think that's a good corollary to like customer success and utilization. So your thing is like, so you're the way you measure training is like how few adverse events do we have? Like, let's say an issue with the product or user error, etc.
Yeah. Got it. Legally I can do.
Got it. That makes sense. For let's say, like, I'm going to LSI in the spring. Hopefully you go. It's oh great. It's the best conference in the world. It's like my favorite conference. It's the only one that I mark in my calendar. People know, do not bother me. I'm going to be at LSI. Yeah. But for let's say your stereotypical LSI company, which raises a 10, 20, 50, $100 million, right? Yeah. And let's not say 100 mil, but let's say 20, 30 mil, right? Yeah. And they start training and they come to you and they say, we're ready to, do this the right way. Do you start with physician training first or sales training first? And why?
Great question. And actually I have them go together. So I create both simultaneously because they're hand in hand. And generally what happens at those organizations is that the reps can kind of get in and get their feet wet first. And so like I let them, generally will take me 6 to 8 months to fully bake, to create both programs, physician training, sales training. And so it really doesn't make any sense to just do one. Like you need to do both if you have a product that requires.
Got it. Yeah, and I guess that does make sense technically, because like there's essentially, if there's a foundation you have to lay, and then you change the nuance of it based on whether this is for a salesperson or for a physician.
And I would say I will train the sales reps first on how to train the physician. So I'll create both programs, but then I will execute the sales training first, if that makes sense.
Which I don't know if this is a good question to ask, but I wonder, like, what kind of product do you feel like there's more ways for things to go wrong, both in sales and physician training? Is it more capital equipment like robotics? Is it more implants? Is it, right? Is it implant? Yeah.
Thinking about it. So I think it actually has to do more with the complexity of the product and how different it is from the current treatment option. So
that's a good point.
That I work on are vastly different, just as a way of thinking. So for example, I'm working on a product right now where the surgeon is used to doing things the traditional way, and we're asking them to suture a different way, to use a different product, to enter into the body a completely different way. And so that to me is very challenging versus taking a product that they're used to, like the entry point, they're used to where that anatomy is. And so I think that's really more where I would see it, not necessarily if it's capital or if it's an implantable or anything like that. It's more just like, how do you get into the body, and then how different is it from a tactile feel? And so I think that part is actually key as well, because physicians are very tactile. Like they know like how things feel. And so we're going this direction of VR and AR and all of that, but they cannot replicate the tactile feel. So that also creates nuances as well as some.
Yeah, it makes sense. What's your, I wonder what your take is on this. Like, something I've noticed in the industry, and it was kind of like one of the places of why I started my company, which is they have like a sales training week, right? But it's all product, right? Which is important. And I think there's this weird assumption in our industry. It's like, oh, if you're in sales and you know how to sell. And I'll be honest, I've had my company. I mean, it's only been 2 years, but let's add like the 12 years I've been in the industry. I don't think I've met a single salesperson, not a single one, including my mentors, who knew how to sell, let's say, digitally and remotely. With that, like in terms of like the consultative sale, one-on-one discussion thing, very, very good. But like even writing an email, like it's horrendous. Why is that? Why is our industry like that?
I think because you have such a limited amount of time to get people to make a difference to the bottom line. And so you got to train them on, you have to assume that those are all low hanging fruit. Like the sales skills are low hanging fruit. You have to assume that they have that because they don't know anything about the product. So they put so much emphasis on that piece because we've hired good people. And I think you're spot on with that. I like your example of the email. To me, it's also like the calendaring, the organization, the how to be effective in what you do, how to be efficient.
I'm going to give you a great example. This is going to shock you. Okay, during, whatever. I mean, people will figure out which company it is. It doesn't matter. I think no matter what company I was at, this is going to happen. In 2020, when reps had to start scheduling Zoom calls, right?
Yep.
Some salespeople I worked with didn't know how to didn't know how to create a Zoom. That was one thing. The other one was like they struggled to create a calendar invite, and I was like, you should be fired. Like if you don't know how to make a calendar invite, like what are you doing as a professional? Like I don't know. Maybe I just have too high standards, but I'm just like, these are like the tools of your trade. Like what are you doing? Like there's just stuff like this. Just it boggles my mind.
Well, I think in their defense. And I agree with you. I think that there's areas that we could definitely teach them the basics, but in their defense, they live in a world that's so fast paced and in person that things really didn't.
Oh, Liz, don't bend that. Don't bend me on that one. Come on. It's so fast paced. What? All right. I'm going to let you finish. I'm going to let you finish. Go ahead.
I do think that those foundational skills, like they're not scheduling meetings with people who check their calendars on a regular, they're walking into a hospital. But I think what the point that you're trying to make is they could be way more efficient and get a lot more done if they could use technology and do some basic things
I mean,
well.
I guess, yeah. And maybe this is like part of my thing, which is like, I guess anybody who goes through my programs, like they come out like this because I'm like ruthless about it. But I think it's just like, you gotta be like hyper aggressive to just constantly ask, like, we could be doing this better. Like, for example, there was a salesperson I talked to a couple years ago where they were like, they couldn't understand like I was telling them, like, look, we have HubSpot, set up a calendar link.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I don't like that. Like, sending this to, I'm like, all right, let me give you the other option. You email the doctor what day is good. That's going to be a day that they're going to get back to you. So they're going to email you like, oh, it's these days. Then you're going to look at your calendar and be like, well, what about this? I was like, so you're going to waste maybe a day and a half or a week going back and forth, or you just send them a link and say, hey, here's some options that are good days. Or if it's easier, click this link and it's done. And I feel like there's not enough rigor around, and I think this is why like training has not improved, in the last few decades, marketing, sales. And again, I love this industry, but all these things have not improved because there's not enough like scrutiny to say like, why are we doing this way? And again, I have my own criticisms of the tech and SaaS world. Like between you and I, like on the training side, for tech, for them to run a sales cycle on something, they have like 3 or 4 people that's involved. There's a sales engineer, there's an SDR that's doing the prospecting. In our industry, there's one person that does all of that, right? Yeah. But a lot of times in tech, and you live in Silicon Valley, they'll look at a process and they're like, this is stupid. Why are we doing it this way? There's just like, you can't get away with doing something dumb because like either your peers or colleagues within the organization will ridicule you because, it just doesn't make sense. But I think like this is why I wanted to have you on my show. My mission as an organization is like change how we sell and market in medtech. But there's a bigger thing about, I want to affect change across board. I can't do that by myself. And there's all these different areas. Like on the training side, I know nothing about training. I know what good training looks like. But like going to a restaurant, I know what great food is, but I'm not going to go open a restaurant. I just don't, exactly. So I think there's ways that our industry has to get better because like at the end of the day, like we're not selling BS products like on marketing software. No offense to my sponsors or anybody else, but like, we're dealing with things that could kill somebody,
100%. I think there's true validity in what you're saying. And I do think if we could instill the basic foundation of email writing, meeting requests, organization, I do think it actually all goes back to organization. And when I say organization, I'm talking about pre-planning your day, pre-planning your week, your month, your quarter. And I know those are things that reps hate, but if you could do that systematically and have like a game plan, and you're not like running to case in Alabama and then going back to Kentucky and then going back to Tennessee, like I know that some people's lives, but if you're able to kind of take control and manage that more, I think that you would be able to be more effective at these things that were the soft skills or the business aspect.
Oh, 100%. And I think like, again, like as disciplined as I am, like I'm not going to even use the word hate, like, cause I'm trying to reframe that, but like, I don't like jump for joy, like when it comes to planning, but it's just super important because if you just like, at the end of the day, I can't control the meetings I get. I can't control the sales. There's a lot of things I can control what I do on a daily basis though. And I think that starts with like really good planning. And I think like, again, this is like becoming a deeper discussion, but this is like, probably why our school systems and educations are all screwed up. Like, I learned the capital of every state and like, advanced calculus, but like, planning, persuasion, like, how to handle money. These things were just never taught to us. And I think there's just this assumption, like, again, going back to salespeople, if you've been in sales even for 5 years, there's an assumption that you know how to sell to people and persuasion. And a lot of times that's not the case. Similarly, and again, this is part of the reason why I was like, I should have Liz on my show, is that I've met trainers, right? Yeah. And when I talk to them, like, I know some basics of like education, right? In terms of how people learn, the formats and everything. And like, I had these discussions with some of these trainers, I won't mention which ones. And I'm just like, this person doesn't know what the hell they're talking about,
And I do think that we've created that in medtech because we've siloed people so much, and we do pass a lot of assumptions that they know what they're doing, especially in the training world, because it's sales reps coming in from the field who've never done training, but they say, oh, I know how to train. Well, of course, you know how to communicate. You're really good at communicating. But if you have to develop something from scratch, it's a whole different story. And so I think we as an industry have done ourselves a disservice of just assuming all of these things. Like you said, we assume they know how to sell.
And I think, like, here's my thesis. And again, wondering what your thoughts are with all these things. If I do like a root cause analysis, I think that up until maybe a decade ago, because I think for our industry, a lot of things started changing, like for the worse, and becoming harder right around 2010 ish, somewhere around there. But before that, like you can walk into a hospital. Like in 2007, I remember I was able to walk into a hospital with no credentialing, walk to the OR and be like, hey, my name's Omar Khateeb. I'm going to be shadowing Dr. So-and-so, They're like, yeah, sure, grab some scrubs, right? And so because of that, there's just so much emphasis on getting feet on the street and selling. And then as a result, when you end up, having a really aggressive sales strategy and making a lot of money, there's assumption that like, oh, then we're just good at like marketing, getting this and that. And now that things have just gotten harder, I think the industry is getting exposed on so many things. Like, we're not good at training, we're not good at sales, we're not good at marketing, like supply chain, the way we think about supply chain. 2020 exposed that, like, we got some serious problems. And I think it's all good things, but the industry's like, it's set up for some serious growing pains. Like, really, like, do you see that with some of the, I don't want to mention your clients, but just as an industry as a whole, do you see these growing pains happening, like on the training side?
I do. I see it collectively. And I think you bring up a very relevant point that, as an industry, we have been a little bit behind on just relying on our sales reps in the operating rooms. And it's so nice that we used to have that access and we could just walk in and out. But now that we can't do that, it's very different. You have to make sure that you understand technology. You have to be creative. You have to find ways to get people's attention. And people no longer are allowing you to just, hang out and talk for no reason. People are super busy now, or they have other priorities such as their families, which I would say probably changed in COVID. And so I think generally I agree with your statement. I think that's accurate, but I also am super hopeful because we have super smart people working in this industry. One of the smartest people in the world are working in healthcare. And so by you bringing these points out and all the people that we're all collectively talking to, I think change can happen and will happen. Unfortunately, I'm not positive how fast it will happen because we're so highly regulated.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think you're absolutely right about that. For there are, like, I'll tell you, like, two of the best trainers I've ever worked with. Mainly just because just their effectiveness with the sales teams and physician training is like Robbie Breedlove and Matt Afshari. Best of the best. I mean, they're so good. And both of them, they were like me. So they dropped out of medical school. And so they have a very methodical, disciplined approach and thoughtful approach about how do we train the salesperson? How do we train the physician? And again, we work together at Missouri Robotics, first robotic spine company. And, robotic spine surgery is now like a thing. It's like a standard now. But I'm wondering your thoughts on, because I think the way it happens, if not through marketing, it's usually a salesperson realizes that, they go to some labs and they realize like they love teaching, right? Yeah. They just love it. And they start transitioning into training. What's some of your advice for like a young professional who's listening to this, interested to becoming like a sales trainer or clinical trainer and everything? What do you recommend them doing? Books, podcasts? What would you guide them to do?
So I think that's an excellent point because I was self-taught and self-trained. So when I came into the industry, I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to figure this out. I was very self-motivated. And so I did a lot of that re-own. And so there's a lot of great places that you can look. So L10 is an organization that you can join that's all about life science trainers. Their content is generally geared a little bit more towards the pharmaceutical industry, but you can take the concepts and learn that. I actually have a podcast as well called Train Smart. And so it actually goes through everything. So all the different topics of training that you would need, it's all done on a topical basis. So if you're like, oh, I'm interested in needs assessment or instructional design, you can always just go find that. So you need to understand the basics of adult learning. You need to understand instructional design. You need to understand assessments. These are just foundational things that you need to know about. You need to understand how people learn, not just learn in the classroom, but learn in all different modalities and in different types of training modalities that there are. From that baseline, so there's another organization called ATD that formalizes in training as well. And then I have courses on my website that I have self-paced courses if people are interested in taking things that are specific just to med device trainers. So what I
That's even better.
Yeah. So I put together an adult learning certificate that was founded on all of the different things that are done in the education world. So definitely you should check that out for sure. There's stuff on instructional design, all the things I just named, assessment creation.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I'm going to plug that in the show notes. But for those who are driving and listening, just go to Cumby Consulting. That's CUMBY consulting.com/courses. And I think that's fantastic. And these are all really good. And again, like I'm very heavy handed with my audience about like spending money on education. I tell them minimum 5 to 10% of your income should be spent on education. I'm not joking. I still do that.
I do
And yeah, it's, like, look, that's the only way that you're going to be able to grow and advance in this industry. I think like relying on your company to pay for things or to like worry about your career is like, it's a great way to set yourself up for failure,
I couldn't agree with you more, Omar. And what I do is every year I identify what are the 2 topics that I want to make sure that I'm privy in, that I want to get better in. So right now I'm really focused 2024. I'm focused on artificial intelligence, of how we can continue, like how can that help us, hurt us in our organizations. And then the second one, I'm still kind of figuring out what that one's going to be, but I know for sure that's one area. I think more video content. I think you do a lot of video content. I think that's one area that we underutilize in training. Just raw footage. Like people think things have to be so professional. I don't think you have to have things so professional. Like get on your phone, record it, call it a day.
100%. Like one of the guys I'm in his mastermind, and he's a friend and a mentor, is Jeremy Haynes, and he was creating a course for like a huge like info product brand, and he posted on Instagram. He's like, "Yep," he's like, "You guys are seeing the right thing. We're recording this course using an iPhone and a lavalier mark." He's like, "Stop making effing excuses." And it's just true. It's just true. Like I think a lot of times things don't need to be overproduced, and I think that sometimes I'm big on perfection, but sometimes perfect is the enemy of like getting it done. I don't know. That's probably not the quote, but I think you follow.
No, I agree with you. I would love to hear your thoughts. So you mentioned 2 trainers that you thought were excellent. Talk to me about the trainers that you think are not excellent and why they are not.
That's a good question. So I think the trainers that are not excellent are the ones that it's kind of like, they're like handing out the stone tablets of like knowledge, and they just sent like, for example, sending this is more like anecdotal, but like I'll give you an example, like sending out like 100-page PDF to salespeople. Like then like salespeople, like sorry salespeople, but like I'm one of them. Like most salespeople aren't the type of people who can sit down and read for that long, nor do they have the skill set to do that, right? I think that's, things like that, or, developing a curriculum where it's like 2-3 days of just like hell. Like it's just a lot of information, and and people are going to, they don't take into account that like people get worn out, like hour and a half long lecture. Are you kidding me? Like I'm a smart guy. That's too much for me. So like things like that, where it's just bad, like like bad UX, bad UI, right? They don't take into account the experience and the needs of the person. I think the worst trainers are just not empathetic. I think they just do whatever easy and convenient for them. And then when things don't turn out well, they don't point the finger at themselves. They say like, "Oh, this person's lazy or an idiot." Which by the way, that those do exist. Those 2 personas do exist. Lazy people and idiots do exist. But that's not usually the case. I think a lot of time when you're not getting the results you want, you have to go back and be like, man, what did we do? Maybe we didn't set this person up for success, and maybe we have to change some things. Right. And I think like, again, like I watched Robbie and Matt do this within Mazor, which is like, constantly iterate and improve on the training curriculum and making it better and better and better. Constantly asking hard questions about, if there's an outlier who isn't successful, to say like, was it something in training that we can improve on? So like they took it very seriously and they refined it, you know. I go back and forth. Like you have to, if it's not measured, it can't be managed. So you have to see, was there retention? Yep. At the same time, I don't think it's the end all be all. Like some people are just like legitimately not good at taking exams. I think it's a cop out. I hate saying that, but it's true. Like I'll give you a great example. I didn't play the game well when I was in medical school. It was like one of the reasons why I left, because I was like, I just don't want to play this game anymore. Where in medical school, for me, like when we studied a topic, I studied it well inside, so I can have a discussion with the physician and everything. Some of my peers, though, who were better at exams, like they just would think about what was going to be asked on the exam and just focus on that and kill the exam. But if you talk to them, they were absolute idiots for that one topic, right? So I think it just depends. So again, like if best training program I've ever seen was one at Missouri Robotics. And so we had like written assessments, like basic standardized testing. We'd also have oral and spoken assessments. So that way, you have to speak through things, you have to have discussions, those kind of things, role playing. And so I think that it just, what, Liz, it's just like marketing. We don't live in the world anymore where you run some tests and you're like, oh, that's our traction channel and that's where we're going to put all our budget. Buyer decisions have become so sophisticated. So you have to have multiple approaches to doing that. I think it's the same thing with training and assessments. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think I agree with you that you need to have some sort of assessment. I think where we fall short is taking account into how people like to be tested. I am dyslexic. And so for me, I have a lot of empathy for people who learn and how they actually are tested. And so I always have a variety of methods for making sure they know what they're doing. So whether it's an online exam, a written exam, an oral practical exam, I actually think it's more beneficial to do it live in the situation, meaning having a simulated OR where they're going in and doing a mock case.
I totally agree. Because that's real. Yeah, that's real. Exactly. Versus, yeah. But at the end of the day, bare minimum, an assessment has to be done. Yeah. Right. Because otherwise you just don't know. And again, like, I think that's the only way that you can manage a training program, which again, like, look, and again, we didn't talk about this, but like, I'm just going to tell the companies and people listening, like, I would say, like, don't figure this out on your own. Like, for example, if I have a client or I have to do any training, like, I'm not going to do that. That would be stupid. I'm going to come talk to you and say, hey, can you help with this? Because I don't think people should try and learn things on the job, right? It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like this, I think when you look at time only goes one way. The only time travel, like, thing that's like real time travel is paying somebody else who's done it thousands of times to tell you what to do. That's like the secret to the universe, I think, or at least the professional world. Like personally. And so, like, I tell people, like, again, like, for the marketer who's listening to this, do you have to go and engage like Liz Cumby and her firm for like an entire training, module and project? You don't have to, but maybe you just reach out and just say, hey, can we pay like an hourly? I don't know, like something, right? Yeah. Don't figure it out as you go. And the reason why I'm like really like excitable about this list is because I see the same thing happening on marketing where there's a marketer who hears about account-based marketing or ABM, doesn't know anything about it. Their company says like, oh yeah, you'll be the one who owns it. Then they go and they're like, listening to podcasts or like reading random books and like figuring it out as they go. 1 in every 1,000 people are diligent enough to do that. You're probably not one of them. And so you should go and talk to a consultant or an expert and pay them. Like, I don't know. This is just like, because then if they don't, they set the program up for failure. The CEO and the board now, whenever they think of that, they think, oh, that's like a big waste of money. And then that's how the industry works. I think the same thing on the training side. Like, I'm sure there's certain training approaches that you've recommended to clients and they're like, we don't want to do it that way. And then you dig deeper and you're like, oh, it's because you had an idiot doing this before for you.
I hear what you're saying.
I get real jazzed up about this topic.
I like it. I think that the way that the methodology that you're speaking about works really well for startup companies and nimble companies. Now, let's say the bigger, like the Medtronic, Smith and Nephew, I think you do have time to kind of learn and hone in on your craft because there's so many people doing the same job. So I feel like if you're at one of those larger organizations where you have the ability, like do the podcasting, do everything, do all the research yourself because you have other people who can kind of fill in those holes. But if you're at a startup, absolutely not. Like you don't have time for that. If you're like a mid-sized company getting ready to be sold, you still don't have time for that. But if you're more at those larger companies, I think then they're going to give you that opportunity. That's why you go to those companies because they give you the funds, they give you the opportunity, like make that happen for you. You can continue to be.
I mean, Liz, I'm just gonna I'm gonna disagree on that one point. It's like if you're at a larger company that have the funds, they should pay you and your firm for help. Like I don't know.
Okay, I hear you.
Like
or both,
like,
right?
Yeah, or both. You know, it's or both. It's just like I don't like. I think people underestimate how difficult certain things are, and I'll tell you the light bulb that went off in my head was when I was designing my course and selling it and everything. There was a guy who, you know, in the ClickFunnels world, he had done like 6 or 7 mil in a year through his course. He's like an expert at course design and marketing and everything. And his program to like learn how to do this cost $10,000. Okay. Yeah. And I remember I was on the call. Yeah. And when they told me that, and I put 10K on a credit card, like I remember the day that happened. Like now it's kind of funny when I think of it, but back then I was sweating hard. I was like, oh my God. But I did it because I asked myself a question. I was like, you know, I'm a really smart, hardworking guy. I was like, would I be able to figure all this out on my own? Yeah. I was like, but the question is, how long is that going to take me?
Right.
Because you people underestimate the amount of information that's out there.
That's right.
And like you could be listening to something, reading something over. How do you know it's the right thing? You know, that's the problem with free information is that, you know, when it's paid, most of the time, if it's paid, it's well known, everything, like it's somehow been vetted, right? If it's free information or not you know, kind of cheap information, like, you know, I don't know. I'm just tired of it. I just wish the industry is like really into taking shortcuts, and it's very clear that they're not good at it.
Yeah,
you know,
I wouldn't argue with that. I do think that if you have the ability to bring in somebody who's done the 20, 30 years of research that you're trying to do overnight, you're not going to get the same outcome, and you're not going to understand the nuances like you and I do.
Yeah, and the other thing is that in that process, you know, again, this is why I use, look, I'm a marketer. I'm a pretty damn good one. I use other marketers and agencies for my own stuff too, because a lot of agencies, they would have launched and done more campaigns in a month than I've done in a year, you know? And so it's just like they have more at bats. I think it's the same with you. Like you've seen so many different scenarios, so many products, all these things, you know? Just in wrapping things up, something a little bit like related, but I'm just curious, like as a medtech professional, I mean, you've done a phenomenal job building a great company, and you obviously have great medtech street cred, right? What does Liz Cumby like to read? What podcasts do you listen to? Let's start with the podcast. Are there any podcasts or audiobooks that you've been, you know, jamming out on recently?
Okay, you're going to make fun of me, so I'm not going to give you the truth on this. I will give you the truth. Hold on, I'm going to pull it up right now because I just had my podcast. I'll go through my podcast list. Hold on, here we go. You can't judge me, okay? You're going to judge me for this?
I'm not going to judge you. It's okay.
So, Revisionist History. I listen to.
It's a great show. Why would I judge you for that one?
The Drive.
But that's not the Drive. The Drive is great. Peter T is the man.
Yes, Huberman Lab.
Yeah.
Let's see the other one. So, the Shalene Show.
I'm waiting for the spicy one.
So
which one?
The Shalene Show. So listen to that. That's a different one.
The Shalene Show.
Yeah. So I'm also a fitness instructor, and she used to be a fitness instructor, and then her husband was in the NFL, and my husband was in the NFL, and so it's just kind of she talks a lot about just life stuff. It's not,
okay.
Some other ones. Let's see. I'll give you 2 more good ones. This one's going to pigeonhole me, and your listeners might turn me off. It's called Your Move by Andy Stanley. He's a pastor out of Atlanta, and so he's someone that I listen to on a pretty regular basis. What's that?
Is it like a religious podcast?
Yeah.
No, that's a great one. These are all great, Liz. What are you talking about? I'm waiting for something like, I thought you were going to say, like, what's her name? Alex, something like like call her daddy.
Oh.
Yeah. I think it was something like that, man. Like, these are all.
The last one is called Fit Body, Happy Joints. And so Fit Body, Happy Joints is really more about, so I have a passion for how the body works and more about preventative medicine and like the whole wellness piece of things. And so I do a lot of research on like, how do you keep your body healthy? Not from like a weirdo way of like taking all these weird supplements and all. No judgment for people who do that. And I shouldn't say weird. I apologize. Let me come back and say,
no. We follow.
Yes, all about the body and how it works and making your spine stays healthy in your joint. So that's why Fit Body, Happy Joints. But books. The one book that I'm reading right now, it's not trash. I would like to read some trash. So if you have some trash books, let me know.
I can recommend some trash books.
You have some?
Oh yeah, of course.
So the one I'm reading now is How Doctors. It's an old book.
No, I have not seen this. When was this published?
A while ago.
Let's see. Yeah, wait, how do I not know about this book? So I'm gonna get this one. There's another one. A lady out of Hopkins did a really good psychological study on surgeon psychology that was done back in the 90s. But I'm gonna check this one out. So all right, so I'll share some of my podcasts. Okay. So I do listen to my show actually, mainly because like I want to go back and like, see how I did, but also like some of the guests I really like. The Game by Alex Hormozi. I mean, what's that?
Only some of the guests you really like.
Well, there's some there's some episodes where like I was already in tune. There's a certain 3-hour episodes where I'm like, I don't want to go back and re-listen to it. But there's certain, like, I'll tell you, like one that I had to go back and re-listen because like there was so much happening in that episode was like the one with Martin Shkreli. That one I had to go back and re-listen to. I don't re-listen to the ones like my solo pods. I really don't like listening to myself, so I skip through that. The Game with Alex Hormozi, like I was following Alex Hormozi like before he was huge and everything. It's very emo of me. It's like, but it is true. But his stuff is really good. I do love the Joe Rogan show. Joe Rogan is great. I think he's a great interviewer. I just recently started to get into the All In podcast. I think they have a really great dynamic group. Yeah, so All In is a bunch of like rich tech guys like David Sachs, who's the CEO of Yammer, and then Chamath, who is like from Facebook, and then Jason Calacanis. And they're all like different in terms of their political ideologies and everything. They have really good guests on. So I had Tucker Carlson on. That was a really good interview. Nice. So I just got into that. But some trash podcasts. This is not a trash podcast, but it's just like, sometimes when I get in the car, I'm constantly doing high level thinking activities, books. And sometimes I just want to take it easy. I want to feel like I'm hanging out at a bar or something. And so like some of the Joe Rogan episodes where he has a comic on or something, those were Flagrant by Andrew Schultz is just nothing but nonsense. It's just like insane. It's just like if you took it's like if you took The View and made a version of that for dudes, that's probably like Flagrant, I think. That's awesome. By the way, like I heard a great comparison, which was oh man, now I'm gonna forget. Is it Joe Rogan? Yeah, someone said like Joe Rogan is like Kim Kardashian for men. I'm like, yeah, like I can vibe with that. Yeah, I don't know. And then and of course, like there's some other ones like my buddy Chris Walker's for the marketers. Chris Walker's Revenue Vitals is damn good. It's very, I think, underrated. That one's great. I got a couple more for you.
Chasing Life. Have you ever listened to that?
I haven't listened to that. I'm marking that one down. The ones that you mentioned too, like Huberman Labs. Huberman Labs is really good. The Drive, of course, the Drive. Real Talk with Zuby. Now I'm on Apple checking. I'm big on it. But then in terms of you asked for trash books, okay? So I don't want to call it a trash book because it is a very good book with kind of like not your obvious like business nonfiction reads. But I gotta admit, Walter Isaacson did a phenomenal job with the Elon Musk book. It's 24 hours long. It's worth a listen because it is, however crazy you think Elon Musk's life is,
Right.
Not even close until you listen to the book.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a good one. I feel like there's like one more. Yeah, I'm just looking like I don't know if I have any more. Like you kind of stumped me on that one. Is like I feel like I should have like, and now I'm looking in my library like trash books. Like I know there's got to be one that's just like complete nonsense, but it's purely for pure entertainment purposes.
Maybe that's our goal for 2024. Right?
Yeah, maybe I was. Yeah, find a trash book that's just pure fun. I mean, I think the original one, which set up like the whole fraternity like book genre, was like Tucker Max's like I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. Like that's just absolute nonsense. But it's funny, like that guy turned out like who would have thought? But he turned out great. Like he got married. He's like this great father now and everything. Like very like devout guy and everything, but like, yeah, he wrote some trash books back in the day, highly entertaining though. I don't endorse the behavior, by the way, but
it's okay.
Entertaining. Don't recommend some of that behavior, but the book. Yeah. I'll tell you what, I feel like there's some insane stories in our industry, and there's a part of me where I want to bankroll the State of MedTech and just start creating docu-series. Like, wouldn't you want to see a Wolf of Wall Street version of early 2000s Intuitive? I'd pay money. If someone started a crowdfund, I would throw down money for that to happen.
Totally.
Let's
do it.
Or like Wall Street version of US Surgical.
Yeah.
Don't
even know US Surgical.
Like, okay, let me tell you the crazy. I want to end, after this like very deep intellectual discussion. Let's end the show on this last question, and I'll go first to set the tone of this question.
Okay.
Which is wildest story you've ever heard in our industry. So I've heard a lot of them. One of the wildest stories I've heard was that back in the 2000s, there was a medical device that was being used by a somewhat big shot surgeon, and it kept failing in the case, and it kept failing over and over again, and it was just didn't work. And the surgeon, and this is back in the day before when you can get away with stuff like this, the surgeon got so angry he broke scrub and walked across the room and socked the rep in the face, like just cold clocked him, and they got in a fight. That's probably the worst thing I've ever heard, but also equally the most entertaining thing I've ever heard.
Yes. See, I don't know if I have anything that dramatic. I think more on my side is because I deal with a lot of the women in medtech. I think it's more on that crazy side of the things that women have to go through in order to be successful in this business. And
what's wild is that some of that stuff still happens. Like, I'm shocked.
Oh, yes. Like, so early on in my career, I was doing a surgeon training, and one of my faculty, who's very well known in the industry, he, after the training, said, "I'm going up to my hotel room." I said, "Okay, cool. So yeah, no, you're coming to my hotel room." I'm like, "No, we're not doing that." "What?" "No, I'm married." And then refused to work for the organization after. And so like that was just called Tuesday. That wasn't even like that. So those are the crazy things that happened to me and like the experiences that I've seen. But I think there's probably a lot more. If you were to do a podcast of all the women in medtech, you'd probably hear a lot more crazy.
And some of them have gone through my program and like opened up about it. Like there's just like no place for it. Like it really upsets and angers me, because like, I don't know, like, a lot of times when I hear these stories, like I think like, would I be okay if somebody made a remark like that to like my mother or sister or my wife? And I was like, those are grounds for getting beat to death, in my opinion. And I think it's like really, really rough, but I think that there's a lot of great female leaders who have risen through that. And I think that they serve as like a great example for our industry, not just for other women, by the way, like for both men and women, in terms of like, how do you rise to the occasion in the face of adversity? How do you not let these things kind of rock you and stuff? And so there's some people who are really like really inspiring leaders, she hasn't, I don't know if she's probably dealt with it, but like, just as an example of like some female leaders, like somebody who's actually, I'm going to rephrase this, because personally, I'm over this whole thing. Oh, female leader. There are leaders I like who happen to be female. They happen to be women. Right? One of them is like Ann Ostuit over at Moon Surgical. Like, I just think she's done a phenomenal job leading the organization. Right? Who are some great women in medtech that you love?
Oh, there's so many. Susan Stimson, Lisa Earnhardt. Gosh, who else? There's so many awesome women out there. Deb Kilpatrick, Amy Belt-Ramundo, Jen Beeden, Amy Borgstrom. There's so many awesome women and they're just taking companies to the next level, and really just I love it. I love it for them. And all of us.
Yeah.
I love it for our industry.
Shout out to medtech women. They've done a really good job as well. I really like what medtech women. I was going to go to the conference this year, but I was not able last minute to get in. So hopefully I'll be there next year. I'll be one of the token dudes in the room. So
no, we love it. Yeah, no, I've been a part of medtech women this is going on my 11th year. So definitely, we'd love to have you.
Great. Yeah, no, they have a great conference just in terms of the speakers and topics they cover, and I like the support system that they have afterwards as well. So, well, Liz, thank you so much for coming on the show. Just in general, aside from your website, which is cumbyconsulting.com, where else can people follow you and connect?
Yeah, so I'm very active on LinkedIn. So feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, either on my personal page of Liz Cumby or on Cumby Consulting on LinkedIn. And just like you, we're making things happen. So thank you so much for having me on the show, and really appreciate your time and energy put into making this space different.
Absolutely, as well. I appreciate it. I appreciate that, I have a peer like you in the space. And I think through our hard work and perseverance and willing to put up with a lot of BS, we'll make the space better. It's not easy being in this space, but I'll tell you, I'm really proud of what we do, because what we do actually does change and impact lives. So with that being said, thank you all for listening. This is another episode of the State of MedTech. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, give us a 5-star review, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you for enjoying another epic episode of the State of MedTech. If you're feeling inspired and love this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you never miss an episode. And be sure to give us 5 stars and write a short review, because that helps more people discover this amazing community of ours. If you're a company who has an executive that you'd like to be on the show, or perhaps you want to sponsor one of the episodes, shoot us an email at hello@khateebandco.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.